This is me on my way to what remains of the last ever Muslim kingdom in Western Europe and the crown jewel at its heart, the Alhambra, a huge, majestic 1,000-year-old Islamic palace. It's still standing today in the mountains of southern Spain, in a city that is proudly part Arabic and part European. But how did this happen? Who built all this on mainland Europe? And why? My journey there to try and answer these questions was a long one, but I was soon to learn that this is where humanity embarked on a much longer journey that shaped not just modern Europe, but the modern world. But before I get there, I'd just like to thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Manta Sleep. Now, Manta Sleep deserve quite a big shout out for not just sitting back and listening to the Tom Thornton complains about not being able to sleep well while traveling YouTube channel, but actually doing something about it. Specifically sending me their Sleep Mask Pro, a premium adjustable eye mask, which I've been really impressed by. It's the most advanced sleep mask on the planet, with true 100% blackout eye cups that are perfectly engineered in the right shape to be comfortable even for side sleepers like me, allowing you to enjoy a nice, restful sleep whether you're in a new environment, a moving environment, or just trying to restore a little bit of brain power during the day by getting a nap in while it's still light outside. And Manta Sleep's dedication to good naps doesn't stop there, because they have loads of options to make your sleep feel extra luxury, like switching out these eye cups for cool ones that you put in the freezer for an extra soothing feel. If you'd like to try it yourself, then use the link in the description or enter code Thornton at checkout for 10% off your own Sleep Mask Pro. Thanks again to Manta Sleep for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to the story. Upon arriving to the station here in Granada, a city in Spain's southern province of Andalusia, and after a very long journey, I step outside on my way to see the Alhambra Palace and unashamedly begin to fulfill my role as an English tourist in Spain, taking photos of the miracle that is oranges growing on the street here, not yet realizing that the humble orange will soon crop up in the surprisingly intriguing local history of Islam and Christianity that I'm about to learn, as will Shakespeare, Napoleon, and perhaps most bizarrely, Ohio. Thankfully for me, that other English pastime in Spain, complaining about how hot it is, didn't apply up here in the cool and fresh mountain air. But the thing Granada does share with the rest of Spain is the blindingly ubiquitous Catholic influence, not least in some pretty mind-blowing cathedrals like this one that also houses the monastery of St. Jerome. And weirdly enough, I was actually here on Andalusia Day, where locals gather outside the churches and put on parades and celebrations. But passing all of that before walking over to the Arab-influenced part of town and the aforementioned insanely grand Islamic palace standing in the middle of it raised way more questions for me than it answered. Why is the city split in half like this? And how come it went on to have such a significant impact on the world? How did we get here? Islam came to Spain in the 8th century when the Moors hopped over to Iberia, did some conquesting, and linked what is now Spain and Portugal to an Islamic empire that spread all across northern Africa right over to Damascus. And it's around the time of that conquest, 1,000 years ago, that we get our first historical record of a red castle on a hill existing in Granada, in a mention from this Arabic poem. But it was under the next dynasty, the Nasrids, who took control of this area for over 300 years, that what we now know as the Alhambra took shape. They took the rugged fortress on this hill and turned it into the stunning imperial citadel that we see today. More than just one palace, it's really a complex of palaces and places of worship laid out across 26 acres like its own miniature city, with 30 towers among more than a mile of protective walls, unbelievably ornate details and fittings everywhere you look, and lavish gardens run on an amazing system of historic and original irrigation and viaducts. It's the type of place that you always remember your first sight of, and this was mine. At the top of a long and winding staircase up the opposite hill, you reach a series of plazas renowned for their view of the Alhambra, where local people gather to look out at it and sing songs. And I mean, well, can you blame them? This side of town, from where you can look across to Alhambra, is where you'll still see the Arabic influence most strongly. It's the old Moorish quarter of Granada, a labyrinth of white buildings and markets carved into the side of a hill, and definitely not to be visited by those without a strong sense of direction. and even stronger thighs. You really don't need to visit the Arabic side of town for long before beginning to understand the work of Francisco de Assis, whose simple poem about a couple passing a beggar in the street reads, "Give him alms, woman, for there is nothing worse than being blind in Granada." But by the late 15th century, the Catholic Spanish monarchs had been doing some reconquesting of their own, taking victory after victory on their way back down south, reclaiming territory from the Moors and replacing Christianity as the dominant religion across all of Spain, until Granada had no more allies left on this landmass and was surrounded. The final Sultan of the Emirate of Granada, Mohammed XII, conceded defeat after a long siege and was sent into exile. According to a local folktale named The Moor's Sigh, on his way up and over the mountains, inconsolable at his defeat, he looks one last time over his shoulder at all that he's lost and can't help but cry. With his exit, the final Muslim kingdom in Western Europe was gone. Spain's Catholic era had begun, with Ferdinand and Isabella as its king and queen. They took Alhambra, and considering it was built in the image of a religion that they had just fought a war to purge from the country, left it remarkably intact. They took it as a trophy, appreciated the craftsmanship that had built it, put a few crosses up here and there, and said that it was now a Christian palace, and took up residence there for several months. And it was during this time that they obviously felt like changing the course of history again, because they extended an invitation to one Christopher Columbus to come and join them in Alhambra, so that they could finally sanction his attempt to head out west across the Atlantic. I'm sure that I don't need to run through the consequences of this moment. The shortest way is probably just to say everything, from war to disease to slavery to empire. This moment that happened in this throne room at Alhambra set us on a course to the modern interconnected world in which we live, right down to the foods we eat. Famously, before Columbus brought them back from the New World, there were no tomatoes in Italy and no potatoes in Ireland. And all of that because one guy walked up this hill and pitched his idea in this one room. As luck would have it, I did not get the opportunity to see that one room on my visit, more on how I blew that in a second, but since those days, Alhambra has had to survive not only the passage of time, earthquakes, and even a bizarre Guy Fawkes-esque failed gunpowder plot from Napoleon, who tried to blow the entire place up. By the 1800s, it was wilting and in need of renovation, which it actually found when American author Irving Washington of Sleepy Hollow fame developed an obsession with this Moorish quarter of Granada and spent a year here walking these streets and translating all of the local folklore and myths and real history to write his masterwork, Tales of the Alhambra. The book was a hit and sparked an international interest in funding the renovation, repair, and well-deserved reverence of the palace here. His romanticization effort was so successful in the USA in particular that some of the best neo-Moorish architecture inspired by this place can today be found in Florida and Ohio, and half of the people watching this video probably live near a building known as Alhambra Theater. In fact, the town of Alhambra, California was not named by someone who'd ever even been to Spain, but rather by someone who had just read his book and was obviously captivated by it. By today, Granada is immortalized in more books, classical music pieces, films, and even video games than you can think of. I loved how it wears its blend of Moorish and Spanish influences on its sleeve, visible in everything from architecture to food to music to local slang. But my favorite example of it, and perhaps the only thing more shocking than the thought of a pre-Columbus tomatoless Italy, was when I learned that Spain was also orangeless until they were brought here for the first time by the Moors during their conquest. Shakespeare himself is supposed to have said, "Every inquisitor traveller keeps Granada in his heart, even without having visited it." And I hope he won't mind me taking this one step further in my claim that Alhambra lives on in my heart without even having visited it. Because having done all of this research and becoming quite in awe of the place myself, I somehow conspired to visit Granada on Andalusia Day, a local holiday, and I couldn't get in. Better luck on my next visit, I guess. Thanks again to Mantasleep for sponsoring this video. Check them out at the link in the description, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.